The autumn wind carried the scent of rain and distant wildflowers as Emma Keller stepped off the stagecoach in Llano, Texas, clutching twin babies to her chest, their small faces peeking out from tightly wrapped blankets despite the warm September air of 1885. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a wild Mustang as she scanned the dusty main street for the man who had agreed to marry her, a stranger, whose letters had been her only hope after losing everything back east. Emma's exhausted eyes finally settled on a tall figure leaning against the hitching post outside the general store. His weathered Stetson cast a shadow over features that were impossible to discern from this distance. But there was something in the way he straightened when he spotted her that made her stomach flutter with nervous anticipation. She shifted the weight of the twins, 4-month-old Daniel fussing slightly while his sister Sarah continued to sleep peacefully despite the commotion of arrival. "Miss Keller." His voice was deep and resonant when he approached, boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each confident stride. He removed his hat, revealing sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of the Texas sky after a summer storm, an intense blue that studied her with undisguised surprise. "Mr. Yates Dawson," she replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "I'm Emma Keller. I believe we've been corresponding." She paused, then added with quiet dignity, "And these are Daniel and Sarah." For a moment, silence stretched between them like the vast Texas plains. Yates Dawson's expression shifted from shock to something unreadable as his gaze moved from her face to the twins and back again. Emma's heart sank. She had mentioned the children in her last letter, but perhaps it had never reached him. Perhaps this journey had been for nothing. Then, to her astonishment, his weathered face softened. A smile began at the corner of his mouth, transforming his features entirely as it spread across his face. "Well, Miss Keller," he said, his voice warm with an emotion she couldn't quite identify, "it appears this ranch just got more perfect." Emma blinked rapidly to dispel the tears that threatened to spill. Of all the responses she had imagined during the long journey west, this had not been among them. Yates reached out, offering to take one of the babies. "May I? You look like you could use a hand." With cautious trust, Emma transferred Sarah into his arms, watching as the rough cowboy cradled the infant with surprising gentleness, his large hand supporting her tiny head with natural ease. "You've held babies before," Emma observed, adjusting Daniel against her shoulder. "My sister had 4 little ones," he explained, a shadow crossing his features briefly. "She's gone now. Fever took her and her husband 3 years back, but those young ones taught me a thing or two." Emma nodded, understanding loss too well. "I'm sorry about your sister." "Thank you." He cleared his throat. "My wagon's this way, got some supplies to load, then we'll head to the ranch. It's about an hour's ride from town." He hesitated. "I should warn you, it's nothing fancy, just honest and sturdy like the folks around these parts." "Honest and sturdy sounds perfect," Emma replied, falling into step beside him. "After everything, that's exactly what we need." As they walked together down the dusty street, Emma felt the curious gazes of townsfolk following them. She straightened her spine, determined to face whatever judgment came their way with the same resilience that had carried her across the country with 2 infants in search of a new beginning. Yates seemed to sense her discomfort. "Folks around here are generally good people," he said quietly. "Might be curious at first, but they'll come around. Llano's small, but it's got heart." "And what about you, Mr. Dawson?" Emma asked, unable to contain the question any longer. "In your letters, you described wanting a wife to help with the ranch. You never mentioned wanting children." He stopped loading supplies into the wagon and turned to face her fully, his expression earnest. "Miss Keller, when I placed that advertisement for a mail-order bride, I was looking for partnership and maybe, someday, companionship. These little ones." He glanced down at Sarah, still sleeping peacefully in his arms. "They're unexpected, sure enough, but in my experience, the best things in life often are. They're not." Emma began, then stopped, uncertain how to explain. The truth would have to come out eventually, but perhaps not here on the main street with curious eyes watching. Yates seemed to understand her hesitation. "There'll be time for stories later," he said. "For now, let's get you and these little ones home before the weather turns." Home. The word sounded foreign, yet filled Emma with cautious hope as Yates helped her into the wagon, then carefully handed Sarah back before securing their few belongings. As they rolled out of town, the Texas landscape opened before them, rolling hills dotted with mesquite and live oak, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across land that seemed to stretch forever. Emma had left everything familiar behind in Boston after tragedy had struck, transforming her once comfortable life into an impossible situation. She had no idea what awaited her at Yates Dawson's ranch, but as the twins slept against her chest and the steady rhythm of hoofbeats marked their journey forward, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, they had found shelter in this storm of life. Yates kept his eyes on the trail ahead, occasionally glancing at his unexpected new family. The woman beside him was nothing like he'd imagined when he'd written to her she was stronger, her eyes holding wisdom beyond her 24 years. And the babies. Well, that changed everything in ways he couldn't yet fully comprehend, but something in his heart told him this was right, even as questions tumbled through his mind. "It's not much further," he said after they'd been traveling for nearly an hour. "Just over that ridge there, that's Wildflower Ranch." Emma followed his gaze to where the land rose slightly, crowned by a stand of oak trees. As they crested the hill, the ranch came into view, a modest 2-story house with a wide porch, several outbuildings, and corrals where horses grazed in the late afternoon light. It wasn't grand or imposing, but it had a solid presence that spoke of care and hard work. "It's beautiful," Emma said softly, and meant it. After months of uncertainty and fear, the sight of this peaceful homestead stirred something deep within her. "Been in my family for 2 generations, Yates explained, pride evident in his voice. "My pa built that house with his own hands, added on to it when more children came along. I've been working to make improvements these past few years." As they approached, a border collie came bounding across the yard, barking enthusiastically. The noise startled Daniel awake, his tiny face scrunching up before he let out a wail that prompted his sister to join in chorus. "That's just Scout," Yates said as he halted the wagon. "Best cattle dog in the county, though he forgets his manners sometimes." Emma soothed the crying infants, speaking soft reassurances while Yates called the dog to heel. By the time he came around to help her down from the wagon, she had managed to quiet them again. "I'll bring your things in," he offered. "Might want to meet Henrietta first, though. She's been helping out since my ma passed. Cooks and keeps house a few days a week. She'll be mighty surprised." Emma's stomach tightened at the prospect of meeting someone else so soon, especially someone who might not welcome their presence. But before she could respond, the front door swung open, and a stout woman with iron-gray hair and a flour-dusted apron appeared on the porch. "Yates Dawson, I was beginning to think you'd forgotten dinner entirely." The woman called out, then froze as she spotted Emma and the babies. Her mouth formed a perfect O of astonishment. "Henrietta," Yates said, a hint of amusement in his tone, "I'd like you to meet Miss Emma Keller and—" He hesitated, the newest members of Wildflower Ranch. Henrietta descended the porch steps with remarkable speed for a woman of her years. "Land sakes alive," she exclaimed, approaching with undisguised curiosity. "The mail-order bride I expected. These little ones are quite the surprise." Emma shifted uncomfortably. "I did mention them in my last letter." "Which apparently arrived after I'd already left for town," Yates interjected smoothly. "No matter now, they're here and they're welcome." Henrietta's weathered face softened as she peered at the twins. "Heavens, they're just babies? How old?" 4 months, Emma answered. "Daniel and Sarah." "Beautiful names for beautiful children," Henrietta said, then straightened and gave Emma an appraising look. "You must be exhausted from your journey. Come inside. I've got stew on the stove and fresh bread cooling." The unexpected kindness in the older woman's voice nearly undid Emma's carefully maintained composure. She nodded gratefully, following Henrietta into the house while Yates began unloading their belongings. The interior of the ranch house was simple but well kept, with polished wooden floors and sturdy furniture. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, and windows let in the golden afternoon light. It smelled of bread and herbs and the indefinable scent of home. "The master bedroom's upstairs," Henrietta explained, leading Emma through to the kitchen at the back of the house. "But there's a smaller room just off the main floor that might suit you and the little ones better for now. Used to be Yates's study, but he mostly keeps his papers in the barn office these days." Emma's cheeks colored. "I wouldn't want to displace Mr. Dawson from his private space." Henrietta waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense, he'll be the first to suggest it. Easier with babies to be on the ground floor." She paused, then added with typical frontier directness, "Though I suppose sleeping arrangements are between you two to sort out, being that you're to be married and all, the marriage." In the chaos of arrival, Emma had nearly forgotten the very purpose that had brought her here. She and Yates Dawson were to be wed, strangers brought together by circumstance and necessity. The thought sent a flutter of nervousness through her stomach. When Emma began hesitantly, adjusting Sarah in her arms. "When's the wedding?" Henrietta finished for her, ladling stew into bowls. "That's for you two to decide, though folks will talk if it's not soon, what with the little ones and all." She gave Emma a shrewd look. "People can be quick to judge what they don't understand." "Yes," Emma said quietly. "I'm familiar with that particular truth." Something in her tone must have communicated the weight behind those words, for Henrietta's expression softened. "Well, you're here now, and that's what matters. Yates is a good man, the best I know. Whatever brought you to this place, you found solid ground to stand on." The back door opened then, and Yates entered carrying Emma's trunk. "Where would you like this?" "The study," Henrietta answered before Emma could speak. "I was just telling Miss Keller it would make a fine room for her and the babies." Yates nodded. "I was thinking the same. It gets good morning light and it's warm even in winter." "You really don't mind?" Emma asked, looking between them. "Not at all," he assured her. "Let me get this situated, then we can have some of Henrietta's stew. Best cook in 3 counties, though don't tell her I said so, or she'll get ideas about raising her wages." He winked at the older woman, who huffed good-naturedly. As Yates disappeared with the trunk, Henrietta brought a rocking chair from the corner. "Sit, dear, you look ready to drop, and those babies need you strong." Emma sank gratefully into the chair, the familiar motion soothing both her and the twins. "Thank you for your kindness." "No need for thanks between family," Henrietta replied matter-of-factly, "and that's what you'll be soon enough." She returned to her cooking, allowing Emma a moment of quiet reflection. Family. The word carried so much weight, so much meaning. Emma had lost nearly everyone she'd ever called family, first her parents to consumption when she was 18. Then her beloved older sister Clara and brother-in-law Thomas to a steamboat accident just 5 months ago, leaving Emma with infant twins to raise and creditors circling like vultures around what remained of the family business. The advertisement seeking a wife to join a rancher in Texas had seemed like divine providence, a chance to start anew, far from painful memories and mounting debts. But now, sitting in this warm kitchen with twins in her arms and a wedding to a stranger looming, Emma wondered if she had been too impulsive, too desperate. Yates returned, breaking into her thoughts. "Room's ready whenever you want to rest," he said. "Not much to it, but I put fresh linens on the dabed. We can figure out something better for the babies tomorrow." "Thank you," Emma replied, truly grateful for his consideration. They ate dinner in the kitchen, Henrietta commanding the conversation with tales of local happenings and gentle inquiries about Emma's journey west. Yates was quieter, occasionally asking a question or offering a comment, but mostly he seemed content to observe. Emma wondered what he was thinking, what he made of this situation they found themselves in. After dinner, Henrietta insisted on washing up alone. "You two have things to discuss," she said firmly. "I'll be on my way home after. My grandson will be waiting up for me." Left alone with Yates in the main room, Emma felt the weight of all that remained unsaid between them. The twins had fallen asleep again, nestled together in a makeshift bed Henrietta had created from cushions and blankets. "They're good babies," Yates observed, his voice soft as he gazed at the sleeping infants. "They are," Emma agreed. "They've been through so much already." Something in her tone made him look up sharply. "Their parents?" Emma took a deep breath. This was the conversation she had been dreading, but it couldn't be delayed any longer. My sister Clara and her husband Thomas. They died in a steamboat accident on the Mississippi 5 months ago. The twins were barely a week old. Understanding dawned in Yates's eyes. So they're your niece and nephew, Emma nodded, twisting her hands in her lap. Clara was all the family I had left. When she died, I promised to raise her children as my own, but Boston held too many memories and Thomas's business had accumulated debts I couldn't pay. She met his gaze directly. I should have been clearer in my letters. If you want us to leave, I understand. For a long moment, Yates was silent, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned forward, his voice steady and sure. Miss Keller, Emma, I meant what I said in town. These children, they're a blessing, not a burden. And you? His voice softened. You're the bravest woman I've ever met, traveling all this way alone with 2 babies, starting over in a place you've never been. Relief washed over Emma, followed swiftly by a new kind of nervousness as she realized how intently he was looking at her. There's something else you should know, Yates continued. I was honest in my letters about wanting a partnership, a marriage based on mutual respect and common goals, but I didn't tell the whole truth either. He paused. I've been married before. Her name was Rebecca. She died in childbirth 7 years ago along with our son. Oh, Yates, Emma breathed, instinctively reaching across to touch his hand. I'm so sorry. He turned his hand over, briefly squeezing hers before letting go. It was a long time ago. But I want you to understand why seeing you with the twins affected me so. It wasn't just surprise, it was like seeing a second chance walk right up to me on that dusty street. The honesty in his words touched something deep within Emma. They were 2 people who had known profound loss, now standing at the threshold of what could be a new beginning. So, she said softly, where do we go from here? Yates considered the question carefully. I think we get to know each other, take things day by day. The wedding can wait until you're ready, though, as Henrietta probably mentioned, folks around here might talk. Let them talk, Emma replied with unexpected firmness. I've endured worse than gossip. A slow smile spread across Yates's face. I have a feeling you're going to fit in just fine in Texas, Emma Keller. As if on cue, one of the twins, Sarah, began to stir, her tiny face scrunching up as she awakened. Emma moved to pick her up, but Yates was already on his feet. May I? He asked, and at Emma's nod, he gently lifted the baby, cradling her against his broad chest with practiced ease. There now, little lady, he murmured, beginning a slow, swaying walk around the room. Your mama needs her rest. Emma opened her mouth to correct him, to explain that she was the children's aunt, not their mother, but something stopped her. In the eyes of the world and in her heart, she was now mother to these precious children. And watching Yates Dawson comfort little Sarah with such natural tenderness made her wonder if perhaps they could indeed become the family they all needed. The first week at Wildflower Ranch passed in a blur of adjustments and discoveries. Emma quickly established routines for the twins while learning the rhythms of ranch life. Yates proved to be a patient guide, explaining everything from the water pump system he'd installed to the seasonal patterns of cattle ranching in the Texas Hill Country. Emma discovered that Wildflower Ranch was modestly successful, with a small herd of quality cattle and several fine horses that Yates bred and trained. He employed 2 ranch hands brothers named Miguel and Rafael Gonzalez, who lived in a small cabin near the corral. They were skilled horsemen and cattle workers who had been with the ranch for 5 years, and they accepted Emma's presence with respectful nods and shy smiles for the babies. Henrietta came 3 days a week to cook and help with household tasks, though she insisted that Emma was mistress of the house now and should make it her own. Between Henrietta's visits, Emma took over the cooking, drawing on skills learned in her mother's kitchen long ago. This is the best meal I've had in months, Yates declared on the 4th evening, helping himself to a second portion of the chicken and dumplings Emma had prepared. Henrietta's a fine cook, but there's something different about your food. Emma smiled, pleased by the compliment. My mother always said cooking should be done with love as the main ingredient. Well, it shows, he replied, then glanced up with a touch of concern. Though you're working too hard, between the twins and the house. I enjoy being busy, Emma assured him. Idleness gives too much room for dwelling on the past. Yates nodded in understanding. Their shared experiences of loss had created an unspoken bond between them, a foundation of empathy upon which something deeper was gradually building. They had settled into separate sleeping arrangements, Emma and the twins in the converted study, Yates in the master bedroom upstairs. Though they were technically engaged, both agreed to take time to know one another before proceeding with marriage. If the arrangement raised eyebrows in town when they visited the following Sunday for church services, no one dared comment directly, though Emma noticed the curious glances and whispered conversations. "Don't mind them," Yates murmured as they left the small white church, twins bundled in their best blankets. "New faces are always cause for excitement in Llano." "It's not just that," Emma replied quietly. "They're wondering about my story, about the children." Yates's jaw tightened slightly. "What you choose to share is your business. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me." The protective note in his voice warmed Emma unexpectedly. She had been fending for herself for so long that having someone stand beside her felt both foreign and infinitely comforting. That afternoon, they received their first visitors at the ranch, the pastor's wife, Mrs. Abernathy, accompanied by two other ladies from the church. Emma served tea in the parlor, answering questions about her journey west while the women cooed over the twins. "Such beautiful babies, Mrs. Abernathy remarked, bouncing Daniel on her knee. "They have your eyes, my dear." Emma hesitated only briefly. "Thank you," she said simply, catching Yates's supportive glance from across the room. They had discussed how to handle such comments and agreed that elaborate explanations weren't necessary. In time, if they became part of the community, the full story might emerge naturally. "We've brought a few things," one of the other women, Mrs. Peterson announced, presenting a basket covered with a cloth. "Just some baby clothes my children have outgrown and a few preserves. We ladies like to welcome newcomers properly." Tears sprang to Emma's eyes at the unexpected kindness. "That's so thoughtful, thank you. When's the wedding to be?" The third woman, a sharp-featured lady named Mrs. Winters, asked without preamble. "I imagine you'll want to make things official soon." An awkward silence fell. Yates cleared his throat. "We're taking some time to settle in first," he said firmly. "Been a lot of changes for everyone, Mrs. Winters raised an eyebrow but said nothing more on the subject, turning the conversation to the upcoming harvest festival instead. After the visitors departed, Emma collapsed into a chair, emotionally drained from the effort of maintaining appearances. "You did wonderfully," Yates told her, handing her a cup of fresh tea. "Mrs. Winters is the biggest gossip in the county, but even she seemed won over by the end." "I don't want to hide the truth," Emma said, watching as the twins napped in their newly constructed cradle, a gift Yates had surprised her with on their third day. "But I also don't want Daniel and Sarah defined by tragedy before they've even had a chance to live their lives." "You're protecting them," Yates said, sitting across from her. "Nothing wrong with that." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, Mrs. Abernathy was right. They do have your eyes, same shade of green." Emma looked up, surprised by the observation and the softness in his voice when he said it. "Clara and I always looked alike. People used to think we were twins ourselves when we were young." "Tell me about her," Yates invited, settling back in his chair. "About your sister." For the next hour, Emma shared stories of growing up with Clara in Boston, their school days, their parents, the close bond they'd shared even into adulthood. Yates listened attentively, occasionally asking questions or sharing parallel experiences from his own childhood with his sister Mary. "She sounds like she was an exceptional woman," Yates said when Emma finally fell silent. "The twins are lucky to have so much of her in you." The simple statement, delivered with such genuine warmth, touched Emma deeply. For the first time since Clara's death, she felt truly seen and understood in her grief. "Thank you," she whispered, "for listening, for understanding." "That's what partners do," Yates replied, the word partners hanging between them with possibilities neither was quite ready to articulate. As autumn deepened, bringing cooler temperatures and spectacular sunsets, Emma found herself settling into life at Wildflower Ranch with increasing comfort. The twins grew stronger daily, Daniel already showing signs of wanting to roll over. Sarah developing a charming, gurgling laugh that could brighten even the dreariest day. Emma's relationship with Yates evolved naturally, their initial awkwardness giving way to an easy companionship built on mutual respect and growing affection. They worked side by side during the days, Emma learning to manage the household accounts, while Yates taught her the basics of ranch operation. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch if weather permitted, or by the fire when it didn't, talking about everything from books they'd read to dreams for the future. Yates proved to be a thoughtful, intelligent man with a dry sense of humor that often caught Emma by surprise. He was patient with the twins, never complaining when their cries interrupted meals or conversations, and frequently volunteering to rock them to sleep so Emma could have a moment to herself. It was during one such evening, nearly a month after Emma's arrival, that something shifted between them. The twins had been particularly fussy all day, cutting their first teeth with considerable protest. By dinner time, Emma was exhausted, dark circles shadowing her eyes as she tried to soothe both crying infants simultaneously. "Here," Yates said, setting aside his barely touched plate and rising from the table. "Let me take them for a while, you eat." "But your dinner," Emma protested weakly. "We'll still be here when they're settled," he finished for her, already gathering both babies into his strong arms with practiced ease. "I'll walk them outside. Sometimes the night air calms them." Too tired to argue, Emma surrendered the twins and sank back into her chair, watching through the window as Yates paced the porch, speaking softly to the babies. Gradually, their cries diminished, replaced by the occasional hiccup and finally silence. When Yates returned nearly half an hour later, both twins were sound asleep against his chest. "How did you do that?" Emma whispered in amazement. Yates smiled, a tender expression that transformed his weather-lined face. "Just told them about the stars. How they're always there even when we can't see them, watching over us." He laid the babies carefully in their cradle. "My father used to tell me that when I was afraid of the dark." Emma studied him in the lamplight, this strong, gentle man who had welcomed her and the twins into his life without reservation. Something warm and unfamiliar unfurled in her chest, a feeling she wasn't quite ready to name. "Thank you," she said simply, meaning much more than those two words could convey. Yates must have heard what remained unspoken, for his eyes held hers a moment longer than usual. "You don't have to do everything alone anymore, Emma," he said quietly. "That's what I'm trying to tell you." Later that night, after Yates had gone upstairs and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Emma sat beside the sleeping twins, reflecting on his words. For so long, she had carried the weight of responsibility alone, first caring for her ailing parents, then managing the household for Clara and Thomas, and finally bearing the terrible burden of grief and the care of two newborns. The idea that she could share that load, that she didn't have to be strong every moment of every day, was both terrifying and profoundly liberating. Yates Dawson was offering her something she had almost forgotten existed: partnership, support. Perhaps even love, though neither had spoken that word aloud. The following day brought an unexpected challenge that tested their developing bond. Emma was hanging laundry in the yard, the twins napping in a basket nearby, when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Looking up, she saw 3 riders approaching from the direction of town, a well-dressed older man flanked by 2 rougher-looking companions. Yates emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth as he moved to intercept the visitors. From her position, Emma couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see the tension in Yates's stance, the way his shoulders squared as he spoke with the older man. After several minutes, the men rode away and Yates stood watching their departure, his expression troubled. When he turned back toward the house and saw Emma watching, he crossed the yard to join her. "Everything all right?" she asked, pinning one of his shirts to the line. Yates sighed heavily. "That was Victor Hammond. Owns the largest ranch in the county and thinks that entitles him to whatever he wants." He gestured toward the eastern boundary of their property. "He's been trying to buy that section of wildflower for years, claims it would rationalize our boundary line. And you don't want to sell." That land contains the best water source on the property, a spring that feeds the creek running through the lower pastures. Without it, we'd be dependent on his goodwill during drought years. Yates picked up a clothespin, absently turning it in his fingers. He's offering more money this time. Says the railroad's planning a spur line through the county, and that parcel would increase significantly in value. Emma studied his troubled expression. You're considering it? No, Yates said firmly, but he made it clear he's not taking no for an answer this time. Said there could be unfortunate consequences for those who stand in the way of progress. A chill ran through Emma despite the warm day. That sounds like a threat. Hammond doesn't make threats himself, he has others do his dirty work. Yates nodded toward the trail where the men had disappeared. Those two riding with him weren't ranch hands, hired guns more likely. Emma's hands stilled on the laundry, fear curling in her stomach as she glanced instinctively toward the twins. What will you do? What I've always done. Stand my ground. Yates reached out, covering her hand with his own. But things are different now. I've got more than just myself to think about. The touch of his hand, warm and calloused against her skin, sent a flutter through Emma's chest. We'll face it together, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Whatever comes. Something shifted in Yates's eyes, a softening, a recognition. Together, he agreed softly, and though he released her hand to help with the remaining laundry, something had changed between them, a connection forged in the face of shared concern. That evening after dinner, Yates asked Emma to join him on the porch. The October night was cool but pleasant, stars scattered across the vast Texas sky like diamonds on black velvet. They sat side by side in the wooden rocking chairs Yates had crafted himself, the gentle creaking a soothing counterpoint to the chorus of night insects. I've been thinking, Yates began after a comfortable silence, about us, about the future. Emma's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. What about it? We came together through letters and an agreement, practical considerations on both sides. He turned slightly to face her, his expression earnest in the soft light spilling from the window. But these past weeks have been something different, something more. Yes, Emma agreed softly, her heart hammering against her ribs. I'm not a man who finds words easily, Yates continued, but I need you to know that what started as an arrangement has become important to me. You and the twins, you've brought something back to this ranch that I thought was gone forever. Emma swallowed against the emotion rising in her throat. What's that? Life, he said simply. Hope, a future worth fighting for. He reached across the space between their chairs, offering his hand palm up, an invitation, not a demand. I'm not asking for any declarations tonight. Just wanted you to know where I stand, especially with Hammond making threats. Whatever comes, I intend to protect what matters. Emma placed her hand in his, their fingers intertwining naturally. The twins and I came here seeking safety and stability, she said carefully. But I've found something I wasn't looking for. And what's that? Yates asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The beginning of happiness, Emma replied, the truth of it washing through her like a warm spring rain. A chance to build something meaningful, not just survive. Yates's hand tightened around hers. Emma. Whatever he might have said next was interrupted by a sharp cry from inside the house, Daniel awakening, his wails quickly joined by his sister's. Emma smiled ruefully. Duty calls. So it does, Yates agreed, but he didn't release her hand immediately. Instead, with gentle deliberation, he raised it to his lips and pressed a kiss against her knuckles, a gesture so tender and unexpected that Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. Good night, Emma, he said softly, releasing her hand. Good night, Yates, she replied, and as she rose to tend to the twins, she carried the warmth of his touch with her like a talisman against the uncertainties that lay ahead. The following weeks brought changes both subtle and significant. Yates and Emma began making improvements to the ranch house with an eye toward the future, expanding the study into a proper nursery for the twins, repairing the roof before winter rains arrived, adding a second rocking chair to the porch where they spent quiet evenings together. In town, people gradually accepted Emma's presence, and if some still speculated about the twins' parentage, They did so with decreasing interest as more pressing matters like Hammond's railroad plans and the upcoming Christmas festivities occupied local attention. Emma found unexpected friendship with the blacksmith's wife, Sarah Thornton, a forthright woman with 3 children of her own who offered practical advice about raising twins in frontier conditions. Through Sarah, Emma became acquainted with other young mothers in Llano, gradually building a network of support that eased her transition into Texas life. Yates, meanwhile, kept a watchful eye on their eastern boundary, sometimes riding out with Miguel or Raphael to check for signs of trespassers or tampering with the fences. Though Hammond made no further direct approaches, there were rumors in town that he was buying up properties all along the proposed railroad route, sometimes through methods that bordered on coercion. "We should consider making our arrangement official," Yates suggested one evening in late November as they sat by the fire after the twins had been put to bed. "For legal protection, if nothing else. If anything were to happen to me, Hammond would waste no time trying to pressure you into selling." Emma looked up from her mending, studying his face in the firelight. "Is that the only reason?" A slow smile spread across Yates's features. "No," he admitted, "not the only reason." Over the past weeks, their relationship had deepened in countless small ways, lingering touches when passing the salt at dinner, shared smiles over the twins' antics, long conversations that revealed the people they had been before loss shaped them into who they were now. They had not spoken of love directly, but it existed between them nonetheless, growing steadily like the oak saplings Yates had planted along the drive the previous spring. "Then ask me properly," Emma said, setting aside her sewing. "Not as a business arrangement or for legal protection. Ask me as a man asks a woman he wants to build a life with." Yates set down the bridle he'd been repairing and crossed to kneel beside her chair. Taking her hands in his, he looked up into eyes that had become as familiar to him as his own reflection. "Emma Keller," he said, his deep voice steady despite the emotion evident in his gaze, "I love you. I love the strength that brought you across the country with 2 babies in your arms. I love your kindness, your determination, your ability to see beauty even in difficult times." He paused, swallowing visibly. "I love the family we're becoming. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife not for convenience or protection, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it?" Tears spilled onto Emma's cheeks as she nodded, her heart too full for words at first. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, I will marry you, Yates Dawson, because I love you too for your patience, your integrity, your gentle heart that you try so hard to hide behind that cowboy exterior." Yates laughed, the joy in his expression making him look years younger. Rising to his feet, he pulled Emma into his arms and kissed her their first kiss, tender and reverent and filled with promise. When they separated, both slightly breathless, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't plan this tonight," he admitted. "Don't even have a ring to give you." "I don't need a ring," Emma assured him, though Yates shook his head. "You deserve one." He thought a moment, then stepped back and reached for the leather cord around his neck. From beneath his shirt, he withdrew a simple gold band threaded on the leather. "This was my mother's," he explained, removing it carefully. "My father gave it to her when they claimed this land. It's not fancy, but it carries all their hopes and dreams for this place. Yates, I couldn't possibly, she would want you to have it," he insisted gently. "She always said this ring belonged to the heart of Wildflower Ranch. That's you now, Emma, you and the twins." With tears blurring her vision, Emma allowed him to slide the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "We'll be married on Christmas Eve," Yates decided. "If that suits you. The whole town gathers at the church that night anyway. Seems fitting to begin our official life together during a time of celebration and new beginnings." "Christmas Eve is perfect," Emma agreed, looking down at the ring that symbolized not just their commitment to each other, but to the legacy of this land and the generations who would follow them. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the twins' steady breathing, Emma felt a peace she had not known since before her parents' deaths. The journey that had begun in desperation was leading to a destination she could never have imagined, not just physical safety and security, but a love that promised to heal the wounds of the past while building something beautiful for the future. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Llano, generating a flurry of well wishes and offers of assistance with wedding preparations. Even Mrs. Winters, the town gossip, seemed genuinely pleased, stopping Emma after church to inspect the ring and declare it a fine symbol of continuity and tradition. Sarah Thornton organized a small gathering of women to help Emma prepare for the wedding and the Christmas season, arriving at the ranch one bright December morning with bolts of fabric sewing notions, and enough baked goods to feed the entire county. "Can't have a Christmas wedding without proper finery," Sarah declared as the women took over the main room, measuring Emma for a wedding dress while cooing over the twins, who watched the proceedings with wide-eyed fascination from their cradle. "It's too much," Emma protested weakly as Mrs. Abernathy, the pastor's wife, presented a length of creamy silk she'd been saving for a special occasion. "I couldn't possibly accept nonsense," the older woman interrupted firmly. "My daughter married back east in a grand ceremony. This fabric was meant to become her second-day dress, but she never needed it. It's been waiting for the right purpose, and I can't think of anything more fitting than your wedding to Yates." Touched beyond words, Emma embraced the women who had so readily welcomed her into their community. As they worked together, cutting and stitching, they shared stories of their own weddings and early married lives, offering advice both practical and personal with the frank openness of frontier women. "The first year's the hardest," Sarah Thornton told her as they worked side by side on the dress bodice, "figuring out how to be partners in everything, not just the easy parts." "Yates and I have had a good start on that," Emma replied, thinking of the challenges they'd already weathered together. "So you have," Sarah agreed with an approving nod. "Some couples take years to learn what you two seem to have figured out already, that facing difficulties together makes the good times all the sweeter." Meanwhile, Yates found himself similarly inducted into pre-wedding traditions by the men of Llano. Judge Parker, who would perform the civil portion of the ceremony, invited him for a drink at the town's respectable saloon to discuss matrimonial responsibilities, while the blacksmith, Thomas Thornton, presented him with a set of specially crafted horseshoes for luck in the new venture. Even Miguel and Raphael, normally reserved in personal matters, approached Yates one afternoon as they worked on winter repairs to the corral. "We are very happy for you, patron," Miguel said, using the respectful title he had called Yates since joining the ranch. "Miss Emma, she is good for you. And the niños, they bring joy to Wildflower." "That they do," Yates agreed, touched by the sincere approval in the brothers' faces. Raphael, the younger and more outspoken of the two, added with a grin, "Our mother says she will make special tamales for the wedding feast. Family recipe, very good luck for many children." Yates felt his ears redden slightly, but he accepted the offer with genuine appreciation. The Gonzalez brothers had become more than employees over the years they were friends, almost family, and their blessing meant a great deal. As Christmas approached, the ranch transformed under Emma's careful direction. Fresh pine boughs adorned the mantels and stair railings, filling the house with their resinous scent. Candles appeared in windows, and a small tree occupied the corner of the main room, decorated with paper stars Emma crafted during evening hours and strings of dried berries and popcorn. "I've never had such a beautiful Christmas," Yates remarked one evening, watching as Emma hung the last of the decorations. The twins, now nearly 6 months old, lay on a quilt nearby, Daniel industriously trying to roll over while Sarah watched her brother's efforts with what appeared to be critical assessment. "Really?" Emma glanced at him in surprise. "I thought this was quite modest compared to what your mother might have done." Yates moved to stand beside her, surveying the festive room. "Ma did her best, but times were often lean, and after she passed," he shrugged, "Christmas was just another day, mostly." This, he gestured to the decorated room, the babies, Emma herself in her simple house dress with pine needles in her hair. "This is what Christmas should be: family, warmth, hope." Emma's heart swelled at the simple sincerity in his voice. She reached up to brush a lock of hair from his forehead, a gesture of affection that had become natural between them. Then we'll make every Christmas like this, she promised. For us, for the twins, for the family we'll build together. Yates caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. 4 days, he murmured. 4 days until you're officially my wife. The anticipation in his voice sent a pleasant shiver through Emma. Their courtship had been unconventional in every way, but the emotions between them were as real and powerful as any romance from storybooks. 4 days, she echoed, allowing herself to lean briefly against his solid chest, drawing strength and comfort from his nearness. The moment of peace was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Yates frowned. Exchanging a puzzled glance with Emma, visitors were rare in the evening, especially with darkness having fallen hours ago. "Stay with the twins," he said quietly, moving toward the door with the wariness that came naturally to those who lived on the frontier. Emma noticed his hand drift toward the rifle mounted beside the door, though he didn't remove it from its pegs. When Yates opened the door, the porch light illuminated Rafael Gonzalez, his expression tense and his horse visibly winded behind him. "Patron," he said urgently, "riders at the east boundary. 6, maybe 7 men, they have torches." Yates's expression hardened. "Hammond's men," Rafael nodded grimly. "Miguel is watching them. They were starting to set fire to the dry grass along the fence line when I left." A cold knot of fear formed in Emma's stomach. December had been unusually dry, the winter rains not yet arrived, if fire spread from the boundary to the ranch buildings. "Get back to Miguel," Yates instructed Rafael. "Tell him not to engage, just observe. I'll bring the wagon with water barrels." As Rafael mounted his horse and galloped away, Yates turned to Emma, his expression grave. "I need to go, I know," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "What can I do?" "Be ready to leave if necessary," Yates replied, already reaching for his coat and hat. "If the fire spreads beyond our control, take the twins to town. Sarah Thornton will take you in." The thought of Yates facing multiple armed men with only the Gonzalez brothers for support terrified Emma, but she recognized the steel in his eyes. This was his land, their land now, and he would defend it. "Be careful," she whispered as he checked his revolver before holstering it. Yates paused, then crossed the room in 2 quick strides to pull her into a fierce embrace. "I will," he promised against her hair. "This is just Hammond trying to scare us. We'll put out any fires and be home before dawn." But as Emma watched him stride toward the barn, fear clawed at her throat. Intimidation tactics could easily escalate to violence, especially with men emboldened by darkness and liquor. For the next hour, Emma busied herself with practical preparations, gathering essential items for the twins, changing them into warm clothing, preparing the wagon for travel if evacuation became necessary. All the while, she strained her eyes toward the eastern horizon, watching for signs of fire. When she spotted the first orange glow in the distance, her heart nearly stopped. It was small, just a pinpoint of brightness against the black Texas night, but it represented a direct threat to everything they had built together. Emma's first instinct was to bundle the twins into the wagon and flee toward town as Yates had instructed. But something stopped her, a sense that running away now would set a pattern for their marriage, for their life together. Yates had said they would face challenges together, and she had agreed. Making a swift decision, Emma wrapped the twins securely and placed them in a large basket lined with blankets. She wrote a quick note explaining her actions, then stepped outside to the small cabin where Henrietta sometimes stayed overnight. The older woman answered her knock with sleep-tousled hair but became instantly alert when Emma explained the situation. "Of course I'll watch the little ones," Henrietta agreed immediately. "But child, you shouldn't be riding out there alone." "I'm not riding to join the fight," Emma assured her. "Just to bring water and supplies to the men. They'll need food and drink if they're working through the night to contain the fire." Henrietta didn't look convinced, but she took charge of the twins with her usual competence. "Be careful," she warned. "And tell that stubborn man of yours that starting married life as a widow isn't what any woman wants." The grim humor steadied Emma's nerves as she hitched the wagon and loaded it with water barrels, bandages, and food. By the time she set out toward the eastern boundary, the glow on the horizon had grown, though it didn't appear to be spreading rapidly. Perhaps the men had already begun containing it. The journey took longer than Emma expected, the rough trail slowing the wagon's progress. As she drew closer to the boundary, she could smell smoke and hear distant shouts. Cresting a small rise, she finally saw the scene below a line of fire stretching perhaps 100 yards along the fence line, with mounted figures moving back and forth against the flames. Yates and the Gonzalez brothers had been joined by several other men Emma recognized from town, Thomas Thornton among them. They were using wet blankets and shovels to beat back the flames, while others created fire breaks by digging trenches in the dry earth. Heart pounding, Emma urged the horses forward, the wagon bouncing over the uneven ground. She was still some distance away when one of the men spotted her and pointed. Moments later, Yates broke away from the firefighting line and rode toward her, his face streaked with soot and his expression thunderous. "Emma," he called as he reached the wagon. "What in God's name are you doing here? Where are the twins?" "Safe with Henrietta," she replied firmly, meeting his concerned gaze without flinching. "I brought water, food, and medical supplies. You may need them before this night is over." For a moment, Yates looked as if he might argue, but a shout from the fire line drew his attention. The flames had jumped the trench in one section and were racing toward a stand of dry brush. "Stay with the wagon," he ordered tersely. "Don't go near the fire line." Then he was gone, galloping back toward the new threat, leaving Emma both relieved that he hadn't sent her immediately back to the ranch and concerned by the gravity of the situation. For the next several hours, Emma made herself useful distributing water to the men fighting the fire, tending minor burns and cuts, and providing encouragement as they battled the persistent flames. The fire remained contained to the boundary area, never threatening the main ranch buildings, but the effort to keep it that way was exhausting. Near dawn, with the fire finally reduced to smoldering patches that were being systematically extinguished, Emma noticed a group of riders approaching from the east from Hammond's property. Yates and Thomas Thornton intercepted them before they reached the fire line, and though Emma couldn't hear the exchange, the tense body language was unmistakable. The confrontation ended without violence, Hammond's men turning back after several minutes of what appeared to be heated discussion. When Yates returned to where Emma waited with the wagon, his expression was grimly satisfied. "Hammond sent his foreman to offer assistance with the fire," he explained, accepting the cup of water she handed him. "Claimed they'd spotted it from their ranch house and came to help as good neighbors would." "You didn't believe him," Emma observed. "Neither did the sheriff." Yates replied with a nod toward a man Emma hadn't noticed before, Sheriff Jenkins, still mounted on his horse nearby. "He arrived about an hour ago, said he'd received word of trouble out this way." "From whom?" "Judge Parker. Apparently, Miguel had the foresight to stop in town on his way back to the ranch and alert the judge about Hammond's men being seen near our boundary." Yates took another drink of water before continuing. "The sheriff informed Hammond's foreman that deliberately setting fires on another man's property is a serious crime and that several witnesses saw Hammond's men with torches earlier tonight." Relief flooded through Emma. "So it's over." "Hammond will back down, for now," Yates said cautiously. "Having the law take notice makes this kind of intimidation riskier for him, but Hammond isn't a man who gives up easily when he wants something." Emma reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "Neither are you." A tired smile cracked through the soot on Yates's face. "No," he agreed, returning the pressure of her fingers. "Especially not when I'm fighting for my family." The simple declaration, delivered in the gray light of dawn after a night of danger and exertion, cemented something in Emma's heart. This was what partnership meant, standing together against whatever threats came, whether fire or flood, human malice or natural disaster. "Let's go home," she suggested softly. "The twins will be waking soon." Yates nodded, suddenly looking every hour of his sleepless night. "Home sounds perfect." They returned to find Wildflower Ranch peaceful in the early morning light, Henrietta dozing in a rocking chair with both twins asleep in their cradle nearby. After assuring the older woman that the danger had passed and thanking her profusely for her help, Emma sent her home with Thomas Thornton, who had followed them back to the ranch. Yates, despite his exhaustion, insisted on checking the property before resting. Emma used the time to prepare a hearty breakfast, knowing he would need sustenance after his night's exertions. When he finally returned to the house, he had washed away the worst of the soot and changed his clothes, though weariness still lined his face. "Everything's secure," he reported, sinking into a kitchen chair. "Miguel and Raphael are keeping watch, just in case, but I don't think Hammond will try anything else so soon." Emma set a plate of food before him, then poured coffee for them both. "Eat first, then rest," she instructed. "You've done all you can for now." Yates complied, hunger overcoming fatigue as he ate. When he finished, he looked up at Emma with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. "You were remarkable tonight," he said quietly. "Coming out there like that with supplies we needed. Staying to help even though it was dangerous. It's what partners do," Emma replied, echoing his words from days earlier. "Face challenges together." Yates reached across the table for her hand. "When I placed that advertisement for a mail-order bride, I was looking for practical help, maybe companionship. I never imagined finding someone like you. And I never imagined finding a home like this," Emma admitted. "When I left Boston with the twins, I was desperate, afraid. Now." She glanced toward the cradle where Daniel and Sarah still slept peacefully. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. 3 more days," Yates murmured, bringing her hand to his lips. 3 days until you're officially Mrs. Dawson." The name sent a thrill through Emma, not just for herself, but for the twins who would grow up as Dawsons with Yates's name and his protection. "We should rest," she suggested. "It's been a long night and we still have wedding preparations to complete." Yates nodded reluctantly, releasing her hand. "Will you wake me if Hammond's men return?" "Of course," Emma promised, "but I don't think they will, not today." Her prediction proved accurate. The day passed quietly, Yates sleeping until mid-afternoon while Emma tended to the twins and continued her wedding preparations. When he finally emerged, looking refreshed despite the lingering shadows under his eyes, they spent the evening discussing practical matters, final arrangements for the ceremony, plans for securing the ranch against future threats, and the legal documents Judge Parker would prepare to ensure the twins' future was protected regardless of what happened. The following days passed in a blur of activity. Emma's wedding dress was completed with help from Sarah Thornton and the other women, while Yates received his own share of good-natured teasing and advice from the men of Llano when he visited town to finalize arrangements with the pastor. Christmas Eve dawned clear and cold, perfect weather for a Texas winter wedding. The small church in Llano had been decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons for the holiday, creating a festive atmosphere that suited the dual celebration. Emma dressed with Sarah Thornton's assistance, the creamy silk gown complemented by a sprig of holly in her upswept hair. The twins, outfitted in matching white gowns sewn by Mrs. Abernathy, would be held by Henrietta during the ceremony. "You look beautiful," Sarah declared as she adjusted the final folds of the dress. "Yates won't know what hit him." Emma smiled, touching the simple gold band that had been her engagement ring and would now serve as her wedding band as well. "I can hardly believe we've come this far in such a short time. When I stepped off that stagecoach 3 months ago, you found exactly where you were meant to be," Sarah finished for her. "Sometimes life works out that way if you're brave enough to take the chance." The church was filled to capacity when Emma arrived, the entire population of Llano seemingly in attendance for both the holiday service and the wedding that would follow it. Standing at the back of the church with the twins and her small party of attendants, Emma caught sight of Yates near the altar, dressed in his best suit, his normally unruly hair tamed for the occasion. As if sensing her presence, he turned, their eyes meeting across the crowded space. The love and pride in his expression banished any lingering nerves Emma might have felt. This was right. This was where she belonged. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. Emma would later remember fragments the warmth of Yates's hands as he took hers, the twins staying miraculously quiet in Henrietta's arms, the collective sigh from the congregation when they exchanged their vows, and most clearly, the kiss that sealed their union, tender yet filled with promise. "Mrs. Dawson," Yates whispered against her ear as they turned to face the congregation for the first time as husband and wife. The name, now officially hers, filled Emma with a profound sense of belonging. The celebration continued at the town hall, where tables groaned under the weight of dishes contributed by every family in Llano. The twins, overwhelmed by the noise and attention, were tended by a rotating cast of willing helpers, allowing Emma and Yates to accept congratulations and participate in the dancing that followed the feast. "Happy?" Yates asked as they swayed together to a waltz played by the town's small band. "More than I ever thought possible," Emma replied truthfully. "And you? I keep thinking I might wake up and find this was all a dream," he admitted, his arm tightening around her waist. "That I'm still alone on that ranch, writing letters to a stranger in Boston." "Not a dream," Emma assured him, reaching up to touch his face. "Very real. Very permanent." The celebration continued well into the evening, but as the hour grew late, Emma noticed the twins becoming increasingly fussy despite Henrietta's best efforts to soothe them. "We should take them home," she suggested to Yates. "It's been a long day for everyone." He nodded, understanding both her concern for the babies and perhaps the unspoken anticipation of their first night together as husband and wife. With gracious farewells to their guests and heartfelt thanks to those who had helped organize the wedding, they departed Llano in the wagon that had been festively decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons by some of the younger townsfolk. The journey back to Wildflower Ranch passed mostly in comfortable silence, both Emma and Yates lost in their own reflections on the day and the commitment they had made. The twins, exhausted by the excitement, fell asleep almost immediately, nestled together in their basket. As they approached the ranch, Emma gasped in surprise. The house was illuminated with lanterns along the porch and candles in every window, creating a welcoming glow against the dark Texas night. "Henrietta's doing," Yates explained with a smile. "She slipped away early to prepare. Said a bride should come home to light and warmth on her wedding night." Tears pricked at Emma's eyes at this further evidence of the community's acceptance and support. "It's beautiful." They were met at the door by Miguel and Rafael, who had remained at the ranch during the wedding to ensure all was secure. The brothers offered heartfelt congratulations before discreetly withdrawing to their cabin, leaving the newlyweds to begin their married life in privacy. Inside, Emma discovered more of Henrietta's thoughtfulness, a fire laid in the hearth, fresh flowers on the table despite the winter season, and a cold supper prepared in case they were hungry after the festivities. While Yates secured the house for the night, Emma put the sleeping twins to bed in the nursery that had once been his study. Standing over the cradle, watching their peaceful faces in the soft lamplight, she was overcome with gratitude for the journey that had brought them all to this place. "They're the most perfect things I've ever seen," Yates said quietly from the doorway. "Except maybe their mother." Emma turned, finding him watching her with an expression of such tender devotion that her heart seemed to expand within her chest. "Their aunt, technically," she reminded him with a soft smile. Yates shook his head, crossing the room to stand beside her. "Their mother in every way that matters," he corrected gently. "You're the only parent they'll ever know or remember, and you're extraordinary at it." Touched beyond words, Emma leaned into his embrace, drawing strength and comfort from his solid presence. "We're a family now," she whispered, "officially and completely." "Yes," Yates agreed, his voice rough with emotion, "and no man has ever been more blessed." As they left the nursery hand in hand, Emma felt a sense of rightness, of completion, that transcended the uncertainties they still faced. Hammond's threats, the challenges of ranching life, the responsibility of raising the twins. Whatever came, they would face it together, stronger in their union than either could be alone. In the master bedroom, now theirs to share, Yates drew Emma into his arms, his kiss deeper and more passionate than those they had exchanged in public. When they finally separated, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Emma Dawson," he murmured, "with everything I am and everything I have." "And I love you," she replied, the words simple yet profound in their truth. "Today, tomorrow, always." As Christmas Eve turned to Christmas Day, Emma and Yates began their married life with the quiet joy of two people who had found in each other not just love, but healing, purpose, and hope for the future. Outside their window, stars glittered in the vast Texas sky, witnesses to the miracle that had begun 3 months earlier when a mail-order bride arrived with twin babies, and a cowboy declared that his ranch had just gotten more perfect. The years that followed would bring challenges and joys in equal measure. Hammond's attempts to acquire the eastern section of Wildflower Ranch would continue, though never again through such direct intimidation. The railroad eventually came to Llano County, though its path ultimately bypassed both Wildflower Ranch and Hammond's property, rendering the water rights less contentious as the region developed in other directions. The twins thrived under Yates and Emma's loving care, growing into sturdy, curious children with Emma's green eyes and their biological mother's gentle spirit. On their 3rd birthday, Emma and Yates told them the story of their brave mother Clara and father Thomas, establishing a tradition of honoring their origins while cementing their place in the Dawson family. In the spring of 1888, Emma gave birth to a son they named James, after Yates's father. 2 years later, a daughter followed Elizabeth, called Betsy, who shared Yates's striking blue eyes and determined temperament. The expanding family necessitated additions to the ranch house, which Yates designed to preserve the character of the original structure while providing room for their growing brood. Under their joint stewardship, Wildflower Ranch prospered. Emma's head for business complemented Yates's practical ranching knowledge, allowing them to weather economic downturns that drove other ranchers to sell. The spring that had been so coveted by Hammond proved its value during drought years, sustaining their herds when others suffered losses. Through it all, Emma and Yates maintained the partnership they had begun on that autumn day in 1885, facing each challenge together, celebrating each triumph as one, building a legacy of love and resilience that would endure long after they were gone. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the day's work complete, they would sometimes sit together on the porch Yates had built, watching the stars emerge over the Texas hills, remembering the unlikely beginning of their extraordinary journey, a mail-order bride with twin babies, and a cowboy who recognized in that unexpected arrival the perfect completion of his ranch and his heart.